Hey everybody, Killian here, and I say that Luminosity versus Navi is the best lineup in CSGO right now. And I'm going to tell you why, but first let's figure out why Luminosity are so successful, how they got here, what got them to this place that they're actually one of the most respected teams in the game right now, I think. And let's take it back to 2 majors ago, right? ESL won Cologne. Or even further back, right? Let's go even further back. Kaboom, right? They started as Kaboom, coming out of Brazil, and they were upsetting people, right? And they then get picked up by Keyed Stars, get more upsets there. They're playing online. They're doing well. They're upsetting NA teams, upsetting European teams when they face them, and they've got a little bit of hype behind them, right? But they get to ESL 1 Cologne. And this is where I think people really start looking at them and respecting their game as a tactical team, you know, of Fallen's calls, things like that. So they come into this major, first match against, who else? Kinguin, right? And Kinguin were really hyped. You know, HLTV Dream Team, everyone loves them. Every player has their own dedicated fan base, basically. So it's these 5 almost superstars, not on the, they wouldn't really deserve to be called superstars, let's be honest, as players, at least most of them, but just in terms of their fan bases, right? You kind of have to consider them superstars. So they come in, they play Kinguin on Overpass, a good Kinguin map at the time too, if you remember, and Kinguin got wrecked. It was 16-6. They got owned, right? Just out right there. And their next matchup was against Envious, and this was on Kabul, and Envious obviously became the #1 Kabul team in the world shortly after this, but at the time it still wasn't their greatest map. And they played them very close, very respectably. It was 16-19 overtime loss for Luminosity, a win for Envy, and they were later, unfortunately, in this tournament, go on to be humiliated on this map by Fnatic. Maybe Kenny S's worst performance of his entire career. But let's forget about that. We're talking about Luminosity, right? The Brazilian Dream Team, baby. Alright. So then they play Flipside. And this was another really close match. It was one that I remember as I was watching, I was on the edge of my seat. I actually had called it for Flipside, if I remember correctly. I thought they were going to pull through, because at the time, I as well was not on board the Luminosity train, right? I wasn't sold yet, even though I probably should have been by this point. They'd already done so many impressive things, right? But they win that. Again, overtime, it was 22-18. And then, obviously, they move on to the round of 8. Secure their legend status, and unfortunately there they go up against Fnatic, right? So they play them first on Train, and they get wrecked, 16-5. Fnatic, surprisingly, always a dark horse to win against any team on Train, right? They're not thought of as the best Train team, but they always have a chance, and they did very well here. Then moving into Mirage, okay, which is the one that I think if you were to put money on Luminosity upsetting Fnatic on one map in the series, it would have to be Mirage, because all the way back to Kaboom they'd had success on that map, but also a good Fnatic map. And Luminosity lived up to that here. They got very close to taking Fnatic, but very upsettingly for them, I'm sure, they lose it 16-14 in the end, and that's them out of the major. And between that major and the next one, DreamHack Cluj-Napoca, they played a single LAN. It was a win-out LAN domestically in North America for $20,000, so nothing really to write home about there. And that, I think, led people to really be, to kind of sleep on Luminosity once again, even though they'd always done so well against EU opposition, unlike other NA teams. Not going to name names, but I don't have to, because the names would be every single NA team on Earth. You know, so people kind of forgot about them because they really weren't on the scene outside of their normal online league play at the time. So they come into that major again as the sort of underdogs, maybe even the lowest seeded Legend team. it's possible. I'd have to look that up. I don't have that sort of ready to go. Are they even seated at majors? I don't think they are. What am I talking about? Anyway, their first match there against Cloud9, and again, people had really high hopes for Cloud9 going into this one, and it was on Dust 2 even, a map that Cloud9 had been so impressive on in the past. Obviously, there was probably even more hype for Cloud9 going into Cologne, but here they lose. Maybe not surprisingly in the end, but this map is where people started saying, "Who is this Cold Zero guy?" This Cold guy is wrecking people single-handedly. Like, you could have him on a team with him and 4 bots, and it looked like he would have still beaten Cloud9 there. That's how good he was, and how good he continued to be throughout the tournament, and really to now. So they beat Cloud9, then go up against Fnatic on Inferno, and it's a win for Luminosity, a solid upset win against Fnatic, 16-13 on Inferno. And then we get into, you know, the best matchup in CS right now. As I've said, only took me 6 minutes to get there. Sorry guys, a little long-winded getting there. But here we are, right? So next they go to play Navi in a best of 3. And even going into this map, before seeing it, people were saying it had the potential to be a really good matchup, right? Because on paper, these teams are very similar. They're both very tactical, very much a fan of the slow execute, right? And even beyond that, they have some more similarities. I think both Guardian and Fallen are very similar in their opping personality. And I might go more into that, sort of the personalities of oppers in another video. But I think they both are fans of going for the, for lack of a better word, the hero plays, right? They look to actually get out there and make plays for their team, right? So that's pretty impressive. And the tactics, obviously, very similar. Their map pools, also very similar, right? They both liked playing Dust 2 at the time. They both liked playing Overpass, the 2 maps that they did end up actually getting through in this best of 3. So everything was set up there for it to be a very impressive, very exciting best of 3. And it was, even though it was only a 2-mapper in the end. It was very, very good, right? Because the first map, Dust 2, goes 16-14. The second map, Overpass, 16-13. Both for Navi. Got to be heartbreaking for the Luminosity guys, but it gave us some really, really, really good CS, right? So let's skip ahead. So the next time that these two teams meet is actually at IEM San Jose, right? And this is sort of the rematch. This is the everyone was talking about it, right? Like Luminosity, this is their chance to sort of get revenge for those super close maps on at Cluj, and sort of make up for that. It's another ESL event, right? What am I saying? yeah, okay, I am. Yeah, ESL event, right? So they're going into it, and Luminosity, of course, had just been improving and improving. Online, they'd always had issues, actually, not being able to beat maybe even lesser opponents, what are thought of as lesser opponents. But on LAN, they kept getting better and better, right? So we were going in looking for yet another great series. And the 2 maps again, right? Playing right into both of these teams' map pools. It's Mirage and Overpass. Both these teams love these maps, right? So the first one, it goes 16-13 to Navi. Another super close one, right? We were so close. You've got to imagine Fallen screaming something in Brazilian, banging on the table, saying, you know, we got this, guys. Let's wreck these Russians, wherever Navi are from. Honestly, I'm CIS. I know it's the CIS region, all over the ex-communist states, right? So very close loss. But unfortunately for Fallen and his boys, it only got worse from there, because the next map, they lost 19-17 overtime on Overpass. Once again, those Overpass games, especially both at Cluj and at San Jose, were incredible, like nail biters, just sick plays from both teams. Cold, obviously going off as always. Guardian going insane, and it's just really impressive CS to watch. So that obviously sets everything up perfectly. Oh, we skipped because we can't just now skip to ESL ESA Pro League because what happened, right? They switched out Taco and FNX, of course, right? So I was actually going to make my very first video, CS video on this, about that roster move because I watched the first day and I saw Luminosity get wrecked, absolutely destroyed, right? 0-16 by Fnatic on Dust 2, a map that they're supposedly good on, right? It's coldzera's playground almost. He always goes insane on that map, and they couldn't get anything going. It was absolutely depressing to watch. And I was going to make my video saying, what were they thinking? They're a tactical team, right? You're going to switch 2 out of your 5 players 2 days before an event with 0 practice time and expect to have any chance whatsoever as a team that has always relied on tactics over fragging? It's insane. Like, get real, right? But obviously that video did not get made by me, right? Because they went on to have one of the best runs anyone has ever had in CSGO. Hands down. I can't think of one better than this, right? So, look at the opponents that they beat, right? Envious. They beat NIP. Insane already. They beat TSM. And then Fnatic, they lost, but they got a map off them. And all of that was filled. Every single one of those best of 3s was filled with insane plays by Fallen, by coldzera, by FNX, even some crazy clutches by Taco, and obviously Fur always consistently plugging away for this team. Just incredible stuff. So that sets us up, right? Recently, the ESL ESEA Pro League Finals. We're all ready to go. We've got it all set up for Luminosity to finally break this curse, right? To take out Navi. They're the one European now. Think about it. They took out the #1 ranked team at the time. #1 and 2 interchangeably, depending on who you asked, was probably Fnatic and Navi. Took out both of them. Took out the #3, arguably, in TSM, TQM, whatever you want to call them. And took out the arguably #5 or 6 in NIP. So the only teams in the top 6 that they did not beat that weekend were VP and Navi. So they're setting themselves up for something. Wait. They did not beat Fnatic. Why did I say they beat Fnatic? Yeah. Anyway, getting ahead of myself. So they beat all these top teams, looking incredible, right? Going into ESL ESEA Pro League, and we're thinking, sick. They get to play Navi again, and it's going to be incredible, and we're going to see a sick series where maybe Luminosity finally overtake them, finally break that curse, and we're actually blessed with it, not once, but twice, because these teams, they play 2 best of 3s. Yeah, 2 best of 3s. And they were incredible, right? They were really, really, really good. So, let's dive into it. So, there we go. Had to go through all of my notes. There we go. So obviously the questions going into this one are the questions that you always have for Navi, which is who will show up behind Guardian, right? And that's always the question with them. And the question for Luminosity was, can they break this curse? Can they overcome this team that they are so similar to? But this time, Luminosity had the momentum behind them. Navi had been looking kind of weak. Only Guardian would show up. Nobody else was helping him out. So it was really tough for them. So the first map of the first best of 3 is Dust 2. And this one, it goes very, very upsettingly for Luminosity, especially with all the momentum that they had behind them, all of the plaudits that they'd received right after their sick run at Face It Finals. But it goes 16-5 on Dust 2. Navi's pick. Okay, you'd maybe expect them to win that, especially it's Guardian's map. Guardian is... Maybe I'll go off on a tangent here. He's nuts, right? He's the best opera in the world, maybe the best player in the world. I honestly might pick him over somebody like Olaf, and definitely over Device right now. But he's insane, and the things that he does on Dust 2 especially, he just understands the map perfectly. He understands every wall in that map, where he can hit, which walls are bangable, where his crosshair placement should be to hit those heads through those walls from crazy distances. He'll be watching long and have this sort of sixth sense to turn back towards Cat and get all of the frags, right? All of them going mid. He's nuts in mid, right? He can push right up mid, take on duels outside long doors by T-spawn. He can op through down into lower tons. You can even go B if he wants to. I've seen it every once in a while. Going back to and another one of Navi's best maps, Train. One of the reasons they are so good on this map is because this is another one that Guardian just understands absolutely perfectly. But we'll get into that later. So Dust, you know, the scoreline was a little deceiving at first. The first half went 10-5 for Navi, but it was back and forth. It was just more that Navi would win 2, then Luminosity would win 1. Then they get reset by Navi winning 2, then Luminosity would win 1. Really back and forth like that. But in the end, they really just couldn't close it. Navi ran away with it. So the second map is Inferno, an interesting one because it's one that Luminosity are thought of as being quite good on, and Navi are also thought of as being quite good on. Like, it's in, I'd say, like the middle of both teams' pools as far as how effective they are on it. Navi, obviously, we've seen they tend to run out of time on that map, even more consistently than on others. But this one was much more competitive, just not as competitive as Luminosity might have hoped. Like, in the first half, Fallen had an incredible clutch, which was very heartening to see. And the thing is, though, that Navi, they just did endless force buys until they ground down Luminosity's economy and ended up taking the win in overtime, 15-19. So once they got it to overtime, they were really able to just close it out. Luminosity didn't get a single round in that overtime. So from there, both teams go their sort of separate ways in the bracket, only to meet up once again in the semis? Must have been the semis, right? It was day 3, and day 4 would have been the finals, right? Yeah, semis. It was the semis. I had to just do some mental gymnastics there. So this one does end up going all 3 maps, but this time the maps they've chosen are a little bit different because the maps that were picked for that first best of 3, even the analysts were saying it was kind of shaky picks for both teams, like a little bit confusing sometimes, and I think both teams picked much more strongly in this best of 3. So Navi picked Kabul. Luminosity. Yeah, Luminosity picked Kabul. There we go. Navi picked Train, of course, one of their go-to maps, maybe the map that they're most confident in the map pool. And then the decider is Mirage. So this especially is set up to be a 6-6 series, right? So Kabul is a map that both teams are very good on. Navi, they're much like Fnatic on Train. They're a dark horse, I think, to beat anybody on that map. And they can be, you've seen it at ESL, ESEA, the finals, just the same finals. They beat Envy on it, and Envy are thought to be the best team in the world on that map. Train is one that you don't necessarily think of as being a Luminosity map, but they had done quite well on it at the Face It Finals that they had this miracle run at. And then Mirage, of course, is a great map for both teams, or at least it should be in theory. And an especially exciting one as well because it's a very open map. Mid is very much up for grabs and very contested by either team, which allows for some great op duels. Same thing at A, even B. So this sort of Fallen versus Guardian rivalry is set up to do really well on that map and be very exciting. So it was one that definitely people were really looking forward to, even after the first best of 3 only went 2 maps. Still a very good series. But I think people were definitely, I especially was very much looking forward to this series, and it didn't disappoint. So the first map, Kabul, Luminosity, their pick. They actually ended up losing it 16-11. The first half was very close. Luminosity edged it 8-7 on their CT side, which is decent, right? Because you'd usually think maybe it would be the T's getting 8, even 9 rounds. So a good start for Luminosity. And it was an economic battle, right, going back and forth. Cold looked very good. Flamey, though, also looked very good throughout this whole tournament, but he was looking very good then. And Guardian, though, was kind of quiet in that first half, which I think maybe gave Luminosity a few more rounds than they would have gotten had Na'Vi had their economic game straight, right? And Edward stepped up for once. Did he there? I'd have to look that up, the stats for that one. Anyway, so the second half, though, it's all Na'Vi. They end up winning it with 16-11, right? And Flamey dropped 30 or 31 frags, I believe. And the thing is, at the end, there were some pretty questionable Luminosity force buys that I didn't necessarily agree with. But Fallen the Mastermind, all hail Fallen, right? You know, maybe I shouldn't be talking. We'll see, but they looked a little fishy to me, a little questionable. So the first map, Luminosity's Choice even, is given up there. So a rough start to the series. Maybe it's looking like yet another 2-0 for Na'Vi, another heartbreaker of a best of 3 going into this one after that first map, especially since the second one is Train, which Na'Vi should be able to just wreck on, right? Not the case, though, as actually it does. Obviously, it does go to Luminosity because this best of 3 goes to 3 maps, but it starts off looking like a stomp for Na'Vi because they end up getting 10 T rounds, and this is usually thought of as a very CT-sided map, right? Maybe you'd think it would be the opposite. There would be 10 CT rounds gotten, and Na'Vi, they had great pistols. They got the 3 rounds after that. Then Luminosity got 5 straight, as you might expect for the CT side, and then from there, that's all they get. Na'Vi just closed it out from there. And that was the one, I believe, where Edward really stepped up. He was looking very good in that first half of that one. But the thing is, they got 10 there, right? 10. You should think that a team as good on that map as Na'Vi would be able to grab their 6 CT rounds. Of course, right? It's over at this point. But not the case, right? Guardian was taking bad fights. He was taking that hero op that I was talking about too far, right? He's very much of a hero opper, as Fallen is as well sometimes, like going out and actively looking for these fights, but he was really trying to push it too hard, which is where things can really go wrong for him. And there were lots of save calls from Na'Vi, maybe early save calls that they could have potentially won because they wanted to save that op for Guardian, right? They know that they need that op in his hands to really be effective as a team. Fur was going big, Fallen was getting crazy impact frags, and it was a really exciting match, and Luminosity really made the comeback, and it was very impressive, really. So that took us to our third map, which was Mirage. Of course, perfect map to close out this series, and one that should have been really exciting, but at this point maybe Luminosity, they were kind of out of gas. Perhaps they'd fought too hard. They'd finally gotten a map off of Navi. They did it, guys. We're doing it, right? In Brazilian, whatever we're doing it in Brazilian is, Coldzera, is pulling out his nose ring in celebration of this victory that they've gotten over Navi, and they're gonna take it all the way, man. We're going to the finals, man. So, didn't happen, right? Anyway, once again, first half goes Navi's way. And there were, again, very questionable force buys from Luminosity. Like, why are they doing this? They, probably in the same way that Navi does it, they want to grind that economy down so that when they finally win a round, the team is forced onto to an eco and they can string some rounds together. But in my opinion, at least from what I've seen from this team recently, they're just not as good at it. They aren't necessarily pulling off these force buys with the same consistency that Navi are. And Navi aren't necessarily consistent, they just consistently get frags and keep their enemy's economy low, which makes those force buys at least somewhat worth it, right? So, in the end, it goes 6-16 Navi. Very, very depressing. Like, Fallen, he had an ace clutch, a really impressive one to sort of stave off defeat, but in the end, it goes Navi's way. But the thing is, it taught us something, and all these series taught us something, which is that Luminosity versus Navi is the best matchup in CS right now.